After an argument, my husband left me at a bus stop with no money. A blind old lady said, "Act like you're my granddaughter. My driver is coming. Your husband will regret leaving you with the richest woman in town." Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. The car door clicked open, a small electronic and terrifyingly final sound that cut through the engine's rumble. "Get out," he said. My husband Richard didn't even look at me. His hands were tight on the wheel of his new obscenely expensive sedan, his knuckles white. I stared at him, my mind a blank, howling void. "What? Richard, don't do this. Please. It's raining." My voice was a small, stupid puff of air, instantly swallowed by the sound of the thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers. The car smelled of his new sharp cologne, and the chemical plastic scent of the dashboard, a scent he was so proud of. "This is the smell of success, Brenda," he'd said. He turned to me then, his face a mask of cold, reptilian fury, an expression I had seen more and more over the past year. It was the face he used when a waiter was too slow, or when one of our children had interrupted his important work. It was a face of pure distilled contempt. I said, "Get out, Brenda." And then he shoved me. He put his hand on my shoulder and he shoved me hard, out of the passenger seat. I wasn't prepared. I tumbled out, my coat catching on the seatbelt clip. My body awkward and clumsy, landing with a sickening wet crunch on the curb. I cried out, a sharp, embarrassing yelp, as I caught myself on one knee on the broken weed-choked pavement. I felt my nylons, the good ones I had put on for the dinner, instantly shred. A sharp searing pain shot up my leg as a piece of gravel or maybe broken glass bit deep into my skin, right through the fabric. I looked up, stunned, my mind unable to process the sequence of events. The man I had been married to for 16 years, the father of my 2 children, had just physically pushed me from his car into a puddle. A light, miserable, ice-cold rain began to fall, plastering my hair to my face. We were on some industrial stretch of road, a place I didn't recognize, a place of squat, dark warehouses with broken windows and endless chain-link fences. A place that smelled of diesel fumes and damp cardboard. A bus stop, its plexiglass shelter tagged with black and silver graffiti, stood 20 feet away, a single flickering fluorescent light in the back of it casting a sick, yellow-green glow. It was the only light on the entire street. "Richard, please," I cried, my voice cracking as I scrambled to my feet, my knees screaming in protest. "The kids, my phone, you have my purse, I don't have any money." He leaned over, his face in the shadow of the car's interior light. "See how far you get on your own?" he snarled, and then he threw something. My small leather purse hit the wet pavement, landing in a puddle with a wet smack. It spilled its contents. My lipstick, a tube of modest mauve, rolled into the gutter. My compact, a cheap drugstore brand, snapped open, the mirror shattering. A small bottle of hand lotion, but no wallet, no money. He'd taken it. He had deliberately, methodically, emptied my purse before he threw it at me. "My phone," I shrieked, my hand darting to the pocket of my thin blazer. It was there. He hadn't taken that. Of course he hadn't. A cold, horrifying realization washed over me. He wanted me to be able to call him, to beg. That was the game. He wanted me to sit here, in the cold, in the dark, in this wasteland, and slowly, piece by piece, realize that I was nothing without him. He wanted me to call him, weeping, and apologize. Apologize for what? For being 40, for raising his children, for not being the 25-year-old associate he was so obviously sleeping with. He slammed the passenger door shut. He put the car in gear. The smell of hot, angry tires and exhaust filled the air as he burned rubber, the red taillights of his $80,000 car disappearing around the corner, leaving me in the dark. I stood there shaking from the cold, from the shock, from a humiliation so total, so absolute, it felt like I was drowning. My blazer was soaked through in seconds. I fumbled for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. The screen lit up. 3% battery. My heart stopped. No. No, no, no. This wasn't part of the game. He couldn't have. He knew my charger was in the car. He had seen me plug it in. This wasn't a game. This was an execution. I tried to call my best friend Sarah. My fingers, numb and clumsy, stabbed at the screen. The call beeped once, then failed. No signal. Of course. Why would there be signal here? I tried to call a rideshare app, my last desperate hope. The app spun, and then a message, a small digital slap in the face. Payment method declined. Of course, he'd already cut me off. He hadn't just left me, he had erased me, all our joint accounts, the cards, they were his accounts. He'd always reminded me, I was just an authorized user, and he had just unauthorized me. The phone beeped, a low final warning, and the screen went black. I was alone. No money, no phone, no keys, no idea where I was. In the cold, driving rain, abandoned by the man I had given my entire adult life to. I dropped the dead, useless piece of plastic onto the bench. I buried my face in my wet, trembling hands, and for the first time, I let myself believe the words he had been whispering, and then shouting. For the past 5 years, I was nothing. I was a 40-year-old housewife with no skills, no money, and no future. I was nothing without him. And now, I was just nothing. It had started, as it always did, with money. His money. The money he never let me forget that he earned. We were driving back from a tense silent dinner at his new boss's house. A dinner where I had, according to him, failed to be engaging. You just sat there, Brenda. You're an embarrassment, he said, his voice quiet, which was always more dangerous than when he yelled. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by the jazz station he insisted on listening to. A frantic, nervous saxophone that matched the beating of my heart. I was talking to Harriet, I offered weakly, referring to his boss's wife. We were talking about our son's college applications. Exactly, he snapped, his voice cutting through the music. You're an embarrassment. I'm trying to close this new venture, a venture that will make us millions. And you're sitting there talking about, what, the PTA? Our son's college applications. Nobody cares, Brenda. I don't care. They're talking about market projections, about zoning variances, about power, and you're talking about bake sales. I flinched. Richard, that's our life. That's what we've been building for 15 years. Michael is applying to your alma mater. I thought you'd be proud. He laughed, a short, barking, ugly sound. Proud? Proud of what? That my wife's only skill is spending my money and talking about our kids. No, Brenda, I built this life. I paid for this car. I pay for that house. You just live in it. You're a freeloader, a 40-year-old freeloader with no skills. The words were an echo of a fight we'd been having for months. It had started when he announced his new venture, a high-risk commercial development project. He wanted to leverage our house, the house I had raised our 2 children in, the house I had personally redesigned from a tract home into a beautiful functional space. Richard, it's too much. I had pleaded just last night. We have college to pay for, Michael's tuition, and then Maya's right after. What if it fails? We'll lose everything. And that's when he'd snapped.
That's when the mask of the successful husband had finally completely dissolved. That's the problem.
He'd shouted, his face purple. You have no vision. You're a small, scared person, and you're holding me back. You're dead weight. Tonight in the car, that same rage was back, but it was colder. He'd slammed on the brakes, pulling onto this dark, deserted road, the tires protesting. I'm done, he said. Done? I whispered, my heart stopping. What do you mean done with the fight? I'm done with you, Brenda. He turned to me and the dashboard lights carved his face into a cruel mask. I'm leaving you. I've met someone. Someone who gets it. Stephanie, his new associate, a 25-year-old with a razor-sharp bob, a law degree, and a predatory smile. She was everything I wasn't, young, hungry, and as Richard put it, part of the real world. It all clicked. The late nights, the business trips, the scent of a perfume on his suit, that wasn't mine. You're leaving me? For her? Of course I am, he sneered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I'm with a woman who understands business, who has a brain, who isn't just a mom. And you're not getting a dime, Brenda. I've already talked to my lawyer. You're not getting the house. You're not getting my You signed the prenup, remember? I hadn't remembered. Not really. It was 16 years ago. I was 24. I was in love. And I would have signed anything. You contributed nothing, he said, the words a final, venomous spit. You've been a glorified nanny for 15 years. You know that prize you won in college? That little drawing contest? That was a hobby. I gave you a life. I gave you everything. And now I'm done. I'm done paying for a freeloader. and then his eyes went dead. He reached over, snatched my purse from my lap, ripped my wallet out, checked my phone, saw the 3% battery and smiled, and then threw the empty purse back at me. Get out. And he had shoved me. He had pushed his wife, the mother of his children, out of his car and left her for dead on a street corner, all to prove a point that she was, as he'd always said, nothing without him. I sank onto the cold, wet metal bench of the bus stop, the fight for survival draining out of me, replaced by a cold, hollow despair. He was right. I was nothing. I was 40 years old. I hadn't had a job in 15 years. My children, my beautiful, smart, kind children, they were almost grown. Michael was at college, his first year, probably at a party right now, safe and warm. Maya was a senior in high school, probably at home, doing homework in her room, wondering where her parents were. My heart seized with a pain so sharp it took my breath away. My kids, how would I even get to them? I was just a housewife, a dependent, a line item on his tax forms. I had no money, no car, no keys. I was a 40-year-old woman in a soaked blazer, sitting at a bus stop in a part of town I didn't know, with a dead phone and a bleeding knee. My life was over. He had won. He had proven his point. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking, my tears mixing with the rain. I was so lost in my own misery, so completely consumed by the roaring in my ears, that I didn't even notice the other person on the bench until she spoke. Her voice was calm, elegant, and cut through the sound of the rain like a bell. That man, she said, her voice a rich, smooth alto, has no idea what he's just done. I startled, my head jerking up. Sitting at the other end of the bench, perfectly poised, was an elderly black woman. She was in her late 70s, dressed in an immaculate dark purple wool coat with a real fur collar, her white hair coiffed perfectly in a chignon. She wore dark, oversized sunglasses, despite the fact that it was nearly 10 p.m. and raining. She held a slender, elegant white cane, not of medical-grade aluminum, but of polished dark wood with a silver handle. She was the most out-of-place person I had ever seen. She smelled, even in the rain, of expensive lavender and roses. She was an island of impossible wealth and grace in this ocean of urban decay. I'm sorry, I stammered, wiping my face, ashamed to be seen in this state. She turned her head, aiming her sunglasses right at me as if she could see me perfectly. I am blind, child, not deaf. I heard the car. I heard his words. I hear your heart breaking. She smiled, a small, sharp, intelligent smile. A man who must shout that he is powerful, child, has no power at all. He just has a loud voice. She tilted her head. I also hear my own car, which is 2 minutes away, and I have a proposition for you. I just stared, confused. My mind was too slow, too broken to understand. A proposition? Act? She said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Like you're my granddaughter. My driver is coming. Your husband, I presume? He will regret leaving you. He will regret it because he just left you with the richest and most well-informed woman in this town. I didn't know what to say. It was insane. This was a dream. A bizarre, cold, wet dream. Why? Why would you help me? I whispered. You don't even know me. She tilted her head again, that small smile playing on her lips. I know him. I know his type. The world is full of them. Men who build their castles on the backs of good women, and then when the castle is built, they try to kick the woman into the moat. I too know what it is to be underestimated by an arrogant, foolish man. And because, my dear, she said, her voice hardening just a fraction, I detest a bully. Now sit up. Stop crying. Your new life is about to begin. You have 2 seconds to decide. I looked at her, this impossible apparition. I had no other choice. It was either sit in the rain and wait for a monster that might not come back, or might come back to humiliate me further, or trust this strange, blind angel of vengeance. I straightened my spine, just as she had commanded. I took a deep shuddering breath and wiped the tears from my face with my wet sleeve. Okay, I whispered. I'm your granddaughter. Good, she said, and she reached out a gloved hand, her fingers finding my arm with uncanny precision. The leather of her glove was impossibly soft. My name is Mrs. Albright, and you are Brenda Vance, I said, using my maiden name for the first time in 15 years. The words felt strange in my mouth, heavy, and powerful. A strong name, she mused. Vance. Yes. I like that. She patted my arm. Now listen to me, Brenda. We have an audience even here. My late husband's rivals watch me. They have been trying to prove I'm senile and incompetent since the day he died. They think a blind old woman is weak. You look distressed. I look vulnerable. But together, she said, her grip tightening on my arm, we look like a family. We look strong. Your fool of a husband gave me a gift tonight. He gave me a granddaughter. Now play the part. You are not a victim. You are my flesh and blood. And you are angry, understand? I nodded, a new strange fire starting to burn in my chest. Yes, I'm angry. Good. Just as she said it, a car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a car, it was a land yacht. A sleek, black, immaculate Bentley. Its headlights cutting through the rain. It was silent as a ghost. It didn't make a sound. A tall man in a dark uniform and cap, Thomas, got out. He didn't rush, but he moved with purpose, opening a large black umbrella and holding it over the passenger door. He opened the door and a warm golden light spilled out from the car's interior. Mrs. Albright, he said, his voice a deep, respectful baritone. He was built like a linebacker, but he moved with the grace of a dancer. Thomas, she replied, her voice changing, becoming lighter, more grandmotherly. A change of plans. My granddaughter Brenda had a disagreement with a foolish young man. She'll be staying with me. Thomas didn't even blink. He didn't look surprised. He just turned his gaze to me, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Ma'am, he said, offering a hand. Mrs. Albright took my arm. That's a good girl, dear, she said, her voice suddenly warm, performing for the driver or perhaps for the whole world. Help your grandmama into the car. You're soaked, poor thing. That boy, honestly, he has no idea who he's dealing with. Don't you worry, we'll sort him out. I played my part. I helped her in the scent of lavender and old money enveloping me, and slid onto the softest leather I had ever felt. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying vacuum-sealed thunk, sealing out the sound of the rain, the cold, the flickering green light, and the entire miserable life I had just been thrown out of. The car was warm, it was silent, it was safe. Thomas got back in the driver's seat, and the car pulled away from the curb, its movement so smooth it felt like we were floating. As the Bentley pulled away from the curb, I looked out the back window. The flickering grim light of the bus stop was fading. And that's when I saw it. A dark-colored sedan, parked half a block down in the shadows of a loading dock. Its headlights were off, but I knew that silhouette. It was Richard. He hadn't left. The cruel, arrogant, sadistic bastard had been watching. My heart hammered against my ribs. He had parked down the street to wait, to see me break. He was waiting for me to collapse onto the pavement, to crawl back to my dead phone, to finally realize I was nothing without him. He was waiting for the moment of my total surrender, the moment I would have to beg him to come back, to forgive me, to take me home. He would have let me sit there for an hour, maybe more, letting the cold and the fear do his dirty work, before he'd have driven up all false magnanimity and rescued me. My humiliation was a spectator sport for him. He wanted to be able to tell me for the rest of my life about the night I was nothing until he saved me. I felt a new hot acid wave of rage, a rage so pure it burned away my tears. That's him, I whispered, pointing, my finger trembling, down the street. He was watching me. Mrs. Albright, sitting beside me, didn't turn. She just smiled, a cold, thin smile. Of course he was, dear. Men like that don't just win. They have to see you lose. They need to watch you break to feel whole. Just then, Richard's car jerked to life. He must have seen the Bentley, seen me get in. He must have realized his show was ruined. He sped past us, his engine roaring, a desperate, angry sound in the quiet industrial park. As he did, he craned his neck, his face pressed against his driver's side window, staring. His face, illuminated by the dashboard lights and the passing street lamps, was a mask of pure, slack-jawed, cognitive dissonance. It was not anger, it was not jealousy. It was the look of a man who has just seen the rules of his universe completely shattered. The look of a man who just saw his worthless pet hamster turn into a lion. He had left his nothing wife, his penniless dependent, his freeloader on a street corner, and he had just watched her get picked up by the Mrs. Albright, in the Albright Bentley, a car that was a legend in this city, a car that represented a level of wealth and power he could only dream of, a car he had tried and failed to get a meeting about for his new venture. He had made a mistake, a big one, huge. His plan had just backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. Thomas, Mrs. Albright said, her voice calm, Did you get the plate number of that foolish boy's car? Already have it, ma'am, Thomas replied, his eyes on the road. Good, she said. She patted my hand. Knowledge, my dear Brenda, is power. And we are about to learn everything about Mr. Richard. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers. The car was so quiet, so insulated from the world. It felt like a sanctuary. Mrs. Albright reached into a small console and pulled out a folded, impossibly soft silk handkerchief. Here, she said, wipe your face. The rain is one thing, his filth is another, and then I want you to tell me who you really are. And don't you dare give me the version that fool in the sedan believes. I took the handkerchief. It smelled like her of lavender and strength. And for the second time that night, I just told the truth. The words poured out of me, a 15-year dam of silence and compromise breaking all at once. I told her about the kids, how my son, Michael, was at her alma mater, a fact I'd mentioned at the dinner which Richard had dismissed. How my daughter Maya was a senior in high school, a brilliant artist, how they were my entire life. And then I told her about before. I wasn't always this, I whispered, gesturing to my damp, unimpressive clothes. Before Richard's career took off, before the kids, I was an architect. I know, Mrs. Albright said quietly, shocking me. I heard it in your voice at the bus stop. You're a builder. Go on. I told her about my passion for it. How I'd worked 3 jobs to get through school. How I'd graduated at the top of my class. I told her about my first firm, about the long nights, the joy of seeing a design on paper become a real living, breathing building, the smell of sawdust and concrete, the magic of it. And then I told her about the Hale Prize. I won the Hale Prize for innovative design, I said, the words feeling like a foreign language on my tongue. It was for my last project, a community center on 5th and Elm. It was everything I believed in. Sustainable materials, natural light, a free daycare, a community garden on the roof. It was meant for people. I told her how, a month later, I found out I was pregnant with Michael. Richard's career at the bank was just starting. He'd sat me down in our tiny apartment, all smiles and false sincerity. Brenda, he'd said, this is amazing, but we can't have 2 high-stress careers. The kids need a mother. This is my time to build. Your little drawing hobby, it can wait. I'll take care of us. You can just relax. And I, flush with love and hormones, and the desire to be a good wife, had agreed. I retired. For 15 years I had poured all my creativity, all my structural genius into building a family. I managed the schedules, the budgets, the renovations on our house, which I had of course designed myself. From the studs up, turning a tract home box into a beautiful light-filled space he took all the credit for. And slowly, methodically, Richard had rewritten our history. My career became a hobby. My prize became a little contest I won once. He had convinced me, and by extension our children, that I was just a mom. That he was the visionary, the provider, the architect of our lives. He had made me dependent, because my talent, my dormant sleeping talent, had always scared the hell out of him. A hobbyist can't leave. A hobbyist has no skills. A hobbyist is a freeloader. He didn't just support me, he buried me. Mrs. Albright sat in the darkness of the car, her gloved hands resting on her cane, listening. She didn't interrupt. She didn't prod, she just listened. She let me pour out 15 years of quiet frustration, of lost identity, of the slow creeping poison of being underestimated by the one person who should have championed me. I told her how I felt my brain turning to mush, how I'd try to sketch at night, only to have Richard walk in and say, "Still drawing your little dream houses? That's cute." He'd reduced my gift to a child's pastime. The Bentley finally pulled into a private, underground garage and stopped. Thomas opened the door. We were in a private elevator, all polished brass and dark wood, rising silently. The doors opened directly into the most beautiful apartment I had ever seen. It wasn't new or flashy, it was real. Walls of books, floor to ceiling, warm dark wood, furniture that was both elegant and comfortable, art that looked lived with, and an entire wall of glass overlooking the glittering rain-slicked city. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a soft velvet sofa. Thomas appeared as if from nowhere with a tray. "Tea, Mrs. Albright, and one for my granddaughter," Mrs. Albright said, her voice firm. "Brenda will have the same." As Thomas poured the tea, Mrs. Albright turned to me. "The community center on 5th and Elm," she said, her voice quiet. The one with the cantilevered roof that looks like it's flying. The one with the exposed beams in the glass-walled daycare, where the sunlight hits the inner courtyard at 10:30 in the morning. I was stunned. Yes, I whispered. That's exactly right. That's the one. She smiled. My late husband, Elias, and I, we built half the real estate in this city. He was a builder, a man of steel and concrete, but I was the one with the eye. And Elias funded the Hale Prize. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. He was a judge the year you won, she continued. He came home from that presentation and he wouldn't stop talking about you. This woman, he said, this Brenda Vance, she doesn't just build buildings, she builds homes. She builds communities. She's a visionary. She sees how people live, not just where they sleep. He was so excited. I could feel tears welling up, but they were different tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. After 15 years of being invisible, I was seen. We tried to find you, Mrs. Albright said, her voice laced with an old frustration. Elias wanted to hire you, to back you, to build whatever you dreamed of. We called your firm, and they told us you had retired to raise a family. Elias was disappointed. He was angry. He said the city had lost one of its brightest lights. He never forgot that building. Neither did I. We've been waiting. I sat there frozen, the hot teacup in my hands. The man who had funded my prize, the man I had idolized from afar, had wanted to hire me. I had no idea, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. My entire life, my entire 15-year sacrifice, had been based on a lie, not just Richard's lie, but a lie of omission. My firm, the one I had given my all to, had buried me, had told the most powerful developer in the city that I had simply retired. They hadn't even called me. They had let me disappear. Of course you didn't, Mrs. Albright said, her voice suddenly sharp. All business. The warm grandmotherly affect was gone, replaced by the iron voice of a CEO. Your husband made sure of that. He didn't just convince you to quit. He buried you. He hid you from the world, and from yourself, because he knew, if Elias Albright got his hands on you, your little hobby would have eclipsed his entire banking career in a year. He cut you off at the knees, child, to make himself feel tall. She set her teacup down with a firm, decisive click. Well, I am disinterring you, Brenda Vance. I didn't just bring you here for old time's sake. I brought you here because I have a problem. A very large, very expensive problem. She leaned forward. I run the Albert Foundation. It is the largest architectural and urban renewal fund in this state. And we are about to launch the New Horizon project. We are going to revitalize the entire downtown industrial core, the exact neighborhood your husband so thoughtfully abandoned you in. My pulse quickened. That area, it was miles of urban decay. A wasteland. To rebuild it would be the project of a lifetime. We've had bids from every major firm in the country, she continued, her voice laced with disgust. They are uninspired, soulless glass boxes. They're cheap, they're ugly, and they have no understanding of the people who will live there. They're corporate, sterile, and they have no heart. They're exactly the kind of building your husband would love. She smiled, a sharp, unamused gesture. I want you to submit a proposal. I almost dropped my cup. Me? Mrs. Albright, I can't. I haven't designed in 15 years. I'm just a mom. I don't even have the software. I wouldn't know where to begin. Stop it, she commanded, her voice so forceful I flinched. Stop it right now. Stop talking like him. Did you stop thinking for 15 years? Did you stop seeing? You've spent 15 years in the community. You've managed a house, a budget, 2 children's entire lives. You know what people need. I don't want an architect who designs for a magazine. I want one who designs for a mother. I want the woman who put a glass-walled daycare in a community center so mothers could take a class without losing sight of their children. I want the woman who designed that roof. The one that made Elias Albright cry. I want her. She gestured to a door I hadn't noticed. A simple, elegant oak door. Through there is a suite. It has a bed, a bath, and the best drafting studio money can buy. It has every piece of software, every printer, every tool you could possibly need. My team will be here at 9 a.m. to brief you on the technical specs and the budget. You have 72 hours. The final presentation to the board is on Friday. Show me the woman who won the Hale Prize. I looked at her, at this blind, powerful woman who saw me more clearly than my own husband had in 2 decades. The terror was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but something else was there too. A tiny burning ember that I thought had died 15 years ago. It was anger, it was hope, it was me. "I won't let you down, Mrs. Albright," I said. "I know," she replied, "you're advanced, now go to work." While I was being led to a room that was more advanced than any studio I had ever seen, my mind already ablaze with ideas. Richard was in hell, he had driven home, his mind replaying that one impossible image over and over. Brenda, the Bentley, Mrs. Albright, Mrs. Albright. He stormed into our house, the house he couldn't afford, and was met by Stephanie, his 25-year-old associate, who had already made herself at home. She was on his sofa in his robe, sipping his $200 scotch. "Did you do it? Did you dump the old ball and chain?" she asked, a bored, cruel little smile on her face. "Shut up," he snapped. "Just shut up. Get out of my robe. Go home." Stephanie's smile vanished. "What's wrong with you? I thought we were celebrating." "We're not celebrating anything," he roared, throwing his keys at the wall. "You just get out. I have to think." He went to his home office and locked the door, leaving her stunned and angry in the living room. He was in chaos. He wasn't just angry that Brenda had been rescued, he was terrified. He was panicked. Because his entire new venture, the one he'd left his wife for, the one he'd bragged about to Stephanie, was a house of cards. A complete, total and utter lie. He had sunk everything into it. He hadn't just leveraged the house. He had taken out a secret second mortgage, forging my signature. He had drained our children's college funds. He had cashed out the stocks I'd inherited from my father, stocks that were supposed to be our retirement. He had poured every last cent, hundreds of thousands of dollars, into his new richest development venture, all for a single, high-stakes construction bid. He was on the brink of financial ruin. His investors, including Stephanie's father, were getting nervous. He was 30 days from total collapse. He needed a massive stabilizing contract to save him. And the biggest contract in the city, the only one big enough to save his entire company, was the $200 million New Horizon project. The one controlled by the Albright Foundation. The one controlled by Mrs. Albright. The woman who had just adopted his estranged, humiliated wife as her granddaughter. He sat at his expensive desk, his head in his hands, the smell of success in his car, now the reek of his own failure. He had just, in the stupidest, most arrogant power play of his entire life, declared war on the one woman who held his entire future in her hands, and he had given his wife, the nothing he had just abandoned, to her as a general. He had to get her back. He had to fix this. He picked up his phone, his arrogance battling his terror. He'd give her a day, let her stew, let her realize how cold the world was, even in a Bentley. She'd come crawling back. She had to. She was a freeloader. She didn't know how to survive without him. He'd call her tomorrow, put her in her place, and order her home. For the next 24 hours I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just worked. It was like a dormant part of my brain, a part that had been starved for 15 years, had roared back to life. I sketched. I drafted. I moved through the 3D modeling software like I'd been using it every day. The muscle memory was there, buried under layers of PTA meetings and grocery lists. But it was there. Mrs. Albright's team were ghosts. A young woman briefed me on the budget, which was staggering, and the engineering constraints. A quiet man brought me coffee and food on a tray, never speaking, just facilitating. And I designed. I didn't design a building, I designed a neighborhood. I threw out the soulless corporate mixed-use garbage that I knew the other firms were proposing. I designed it based on 15 years of watching mothers try to push strollers over broken sidewalks. I designed it based on knowing where the sun hits at 3 p.m. when kids get home from school. I designed parks that were visible from kitchen windows. Small pocket parks where children could be safe. I designed mixed-use buildings with state-of-the-art, subsidized daycares on the ground floor, so parents could work. I designed it for people, not for a magazine cover. It was the Hale Prize design, but grown up. It was my heart, my pain, and my 15 years of silent observation, all rendered in steel, glass and green space. I was alive. My phone, now fully charged on a new charger Thomas had provided, sat on the desk, silent, until finally at 3 p.m. the next day it rang. I looked at the screen. Richard. I took a deep breath, my hand steady, and answered. "Hello, Richard." There was a pause. He had expected me to be crying, To be begging. My voice was calm, clear and focused. I was in the middle of a complex load-bearing calculation, and he was an interruption. Brenda? Where the hell are you? He demanded. His voice was tight, angry. His plan hadn't worked. I hadn't called. He had been forced to call me. I'm working, Richard, I said, my eyes still on the screen. Working? He scoffed. What is this? This ridiculous game? Did you run to some old woman? I am your husband, Brenda. You come home now. I'm willing to overlook this little stunt. But you come home and we'll talk about your allowance. There it was. That word. Allowance. The word he used for a child. For a dependent. The word he used to keep me small. He was trying to re-establish control. To pull me back into the tiny dark box he had built for me. The old Brenda would have cried. Would have apologized. Would have said, yes, Richard, I'm sorry. The old Brenda was dead. Left on the curb in the rain. The new Brenda, the real Brenda, just smiled. I'm busy, Richard, I said, my voice cool. I'm working on a proposal. Don't call me again. A proposal? He laughed. A cruel, barking, dismissive laugh that I had heard 1,000 times before. Working? You? Don't be ridiculous. You're a 40-year-old housewife. You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back in a day, when you're hungry. Stop this fantasy and come home. He hung up. He had sealed his fate. He had given me the final necessary push. He thought I was playing. He thought I was a hobbyist. He had no idea I was at war. I turned back to my design. I wasn't just building a community anymore. I was building a fortress. The 72 hours passed in a blur of creative fire. I had slept for maybe 4 hours, catnapping on the studio's small sofa, but I had never felt more energized. Thomas had at some point taken my rain-soaked, humiliated clothes. In their place, Mrs. Albright's assistant, a woman with a kind, no-nonsense face, had provided a new wardrobe. She hadn't asked my size. She just knew. It wasn't a housewife dress. It was a perfectly tailored dark blue suit, a silk shell, and low, powerful heels. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the freeloader. I didn't see Richard's dependent. I saw me. I saw the woman I was supposed to be. I saw the architect who had won the Hale Prize. I walked into the Albright Foundation boardroom. It was a long, imposing mahogany table, filled with 12 of the most powerful people in the city. Bankers, city planners, community leaders, lawyers. They all looked skeptical. They saw a 40-year-old woman with a 15-year gap in her resume, a woman who had, according to the rumors, been plucked from a bus stop by their eccentric blind matriarch. I was a pet project. Mrs. Albright sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of polite neutrality, her sunglasses aimed at the speaker's podium. Ms. Vance, the chairman said, a man notorious for his ruthless cost-cutting. We've seen the proposals from Issam, from Gensler, from everyone. We're interested to see what you have. The U was heavy with doubt. I took my place. I loaded my presentation, and I began. I didn't start with blueprints. I started with people. For 15 years, I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing with an authority I thought I'd lost. I have not been an architect. I have been a mother, a scheduler, a household CFO, a therapist, and a logistician. I have been a freeloader, and in that time I have learned one thing. Modern cities are built to inconvenience, and to punish the people who do the most important work, raising the next generation. I clicked to a slide. It was a photo of the bus stop where Richard had left me. This, I said, is the New Horizon project area. It is a food desert, it is a daycare desert, it is a hope desert. The other firms see a blank slate for profit. I see a 15-year-old girl, like my daughter, who has to walk 3 miles under a broken streetlight to catch a bus. I see a mother like me, trying to push a stroller over broken sidewalks to get to a grocery store. I see a life of needless, grinding difficulty. And then I unveiled my plan. The New Horizon was not a collection of buildings. It was a system, a community. I showed them the intertwined parks, the community gardens on the rooftops, the glass-walled, 24/7 subsidized daycare on the ground floor of the main office building. You want productivity, I said to the bankers. Give parents a safe place to put their children. I showed them the modular, affordable housing, the solar panels, the water reclamation. I showed them my heart. It was the Hale Prize design, but grown up. It was my pain and my 15 years of silent observation, all rendered in steel, glass and green space. When I finished, the room was silent. I looked at Mrs. Albright. She had a small 3D printed model of my design in her hands, her long, elegant fingers tracing the lines of the cantilevered roof of the community center. She ran her hands over the textured green spaces, the small, perfect models of the play areas. She smiled, a slow, brilliant smile that lit up her entire face. "She's back," she whispered. Then she looked up at the board. "Well?" The chairman, the ruthless cost-cutter, just shook his head, looking at my plans. He looked moved. It's revolutionary," he said, his voice full of awe. It's human. It's not just a building, it's a legacy. The numbers," he looked at my budget. "They're tight, but they work. My God, they work." The vote was unanimous. A week later I was standing in the atrium of City Hall. I was not the same woman who had been shoved out of a car. I was the woman my 25-year-old self had always dreamed of becoming. Mrs. Albright was beside me, her hand looped through my arm. The room was packed. The mayor was there. Every news outlet in the city. The entire business community. This was the biggest urban renewal project in the state's history. And in the back of the crowd I saw him. Richard. He was wearing his best suit, his power suit, his face plastered with a fake schmoozing smile. He was working the room, handing out business cards, his eyes darting around, desperate. He was there to network, to plead, to beg for a subcontract from whoever the winner was. He was a shark smelling blood, not realizing it was his own. His company, Richard's Development, was on the press release as a potential bidder, a lie he must have fed them himself. He hadn't called me since I'd hung up on him. His arrogance wouldn't let him. He still thought he was in control. He still thought I was his nothing. He saw me standing on the dais next to Mrs. Albright and his smile faltered, a look of pure confusion on his face. He probably thought I was her new assistant, her new dependent, a glorified nursemaid. He even gave me a small, condescending "what are you doing up there" smirk. I just smiled back. The mayor spoke. The chairman of the board spoke. And then, Mrs. Albright was wheeled to the podium. She insisted on a wheelchair for dramatic effect as she'd told me. "It makes them lean in. The Albright Foundation," she said, her voice booming through the speakers, "is not just investing $200 million. We are investing in a vision." For weeks we reviewed bids from the largest firms in the world. Assam, Ginsler, Perkins and Will. And they were all boring. A small appreciative laugh rippled through the crowd. They were tombs of glass and steel. We needed a visionary. We needed someone who didn't just see buildings, but saw people, and we found her, or rather, she smiled, turning her sunglasses in my direction. She returned to us. I saw Richard in the back shifting impatiently, checking his watch, clearly annoyed by the old woman's speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Albright announced, her voice ringing with pride, "the lead architect and project director for the New Horizon project, Miss Brenda Vance." Vance? My maiden name. I stepped up to the podium. The room exploded in applause. The flashbulbs were blinding. I looked out over the crowd, and my eyes found Richard. His fake smile was gone. His face was a mask of chalky, abject horror. He was staring at me, his mouth open, his stack of business cards fluttering from his numb hand to the floor. He wasn't just ruined, he was publicly ruined. He had just realized his nothing wife, his freeloader, his hobbyist, was now quite literally his boss. She was the gatekeeper to the $200 million project that was his only financial lifeline. He had just seen a ghost, and she owned his future. After the press conference I was surrounded. The mayor, council members, other architects, all congratulating me. "A masterpiece of human-centered design," one said. "A breath of fresh air," said another. I was shaking hands, smiling, a 15-year-old dream roaring to life. I was me again. Then, the crowd parted. Richard. He shoved his way through, his face a grotesque mask of fake joy and desperate sweating panic. He looked small. His power suit seemed to hang on him. "Brenda," he boomed, spreading his arms wide, as if to hug me. I didn't move, and he stopped, his arms falling awkwardly to his sides. "Baby, we did it," he said, his voice slick with a salesman's false intimacy. "This is amazing. I knew you had it in you. I always believed in you." I just looked at him. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just assessed. He was a bad investment. He was a poorly designed building, all facade and no foundation. "This is perfect," he continued. his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, ignoring the fact that I hadn't moved, that a small circle of silence had formed around us. Now, all you have to do is tell the board that my company Richard's Development is handling the construction. It's a no-brainer. We're a team. I've already leveraged everything to be ready for this. We can save our house. We can save everything. We? I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through his frantic babble like a knife. There is no we, Richard. His smile flickered. His eyes darted around, noticing the people watching. What? Brenda, don't be like that. This is us. Our future. You told me, I said, my voice as cool and clear as the day Mrs. Albright had rescued me, that I contributed nothing. You told me I was a freeloader. You told me I leaned in, that I was a 40-year-old housewife with no skills. You told me I was nothing without you. You left me at a bus stop in the rain with no money, to see how far I'd get. I looked him right in the eye, and for the first time, I saw fear. Well, I got here, no thanks to you. His face turned dark red. The mask was slipping. The public humiliation was more than he could bear. You owe me, he hissed, his hand shooting out, grabbing my arm, his fingers digging into the fine wool of my new suit. 15 years, Brenda. I paid for you for 15 years. You owe me this. You will not destroy my company. Before I could even react, a large, quiet presence was between us. Thomas, Mrs. Albright's driver, was there. He wasn't in his uniform, he was in a sharp dark suit, his hands clasped in front of him. He didn't grab Rich, he just placed his hand, a hand the size of a dinner plate, flat on Richard's chest. It wasn't a push, it was a wall. Mr. Sterling, Thomas said, his voice a low, polite rumble, I suggest you remove your hand from Miss Vance. Richard, faced with a man twice his size and half his age, recoiled as if he'd been burned, snatching his hand back. He looked around, sputtering, realizing he had just assaulted the project's lead architect in front of the mayor. Mrs. Albright was suddenly at my other arm, her hand linking through mine. She turned her sunglasses toward Richard, a queen addressing a particularly stupid court jester. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice dripping with an icy disappointment that was far worse than any anger. My granddaughter is very busy. She has a meeting with the mayor. Your mistake, I believe, was in your timing. You should never leave a visionary with another visionary. We tend to find each other, and we have excellent memories. She patted my hand. Brenda, dear, we're late. She began to move, and I moved with her. Richard just stood there, his world collapsing. Brenda, he called, his voice now a desperate cracking plea. What am I supposed to do? The house, the company. I'm ruined. You can't just leave me. I stopped. I turned back to him just once. I looked at this small, terrified, hollow man who had tried to destroy me. You're right, Richard, I said, and my voice was not angry, it was not triumphant, it was just true. I am nothing without you. I'm better. You wanted to see how far I'd get on my own? I suggest you start watching. I turned, and Mrs. Albright and I walked away. We got into the Bentley, leaving him on the curb of City Hall. The last I saw of him, the reporters smelling blood were swarming him, a new, better story forming in their minds. Mr. Sterling, what's your reaction to your wife's new role? Mr. Sterling, how does it feel to be reporting to your estranged wife? Mr. Sterling, is it true your company is facing foreclosure? He was alone, he was ruined, he was finally nothing.